So this UFC Uruguay card is a lot of interesting fighters that are on it. So far, when I'm recording right now, this is at the end of the prelim, so there have been a handful of other fights that have gone on. So the one I'm going to talk about here is Ciryl Gane getting the win over Raphael Pessoa. We also saw Marina Rodriguez, who's a pretty good prospect in her own right, who's technically undefeated. She just got a win over Tisha Torres. Rulian Paiva and Rogerio Bontorin was a really good fight. And a few other really good guys have fought so far, but we're going to see some other ones too. But one of the guys that people are looking at as probably one of the biggest prospects who's making their debut on this card is Ciryl Gane. He came into this fight 3-0. He's a guy who's a training partner of Francis Ngannou. He's 12-0 in Muay Thai. And people feel that in a really thin division at heavyweight, he's a guy who could climb the ladder pretty quickly. So as far as what we learned from him and whether or not he's as good as people say, I guess it's kind of hard to say. So this guy Pessoa that he fought, he was one of those guys who has to cut down to hit 265. Throws with a lot of power. Apparently, he's known more for his grappling, but he can obviously knock you out too. Gane fought fairly tactical. He didn't engage as much as people would expect. I guess when you throw the name Francis Ngannou around him, people just assume he's going to run in and act like a berserker, and that wasn't the case. So at least on the feet, it was 20-9 in total strikes. So 15-7 in significant strikes. So you can see he definitely got the better of Pessoa on the feet. But it's not like he just absolutely destroyed him. There was one sequence before the end of the fight where they both threw haymakers at the same time, and they ended up like clashing biceps, where it looked like there could have been a knockout there, but it didn't look like either of them landed clean. But for the most part, it's not as though Gane landed any shots where it's like, oh my gosh, look at all this power. So sure, it could be there, but from the one fight we have so far, at least from the striking standpoint, he outstruck his opponent. He did what he had to there, but it wasn't like a typical Francis Ngannou fight where he runs through the guy. One of the things I'm seeing a lot online, though, that I think is a little bit erroneous is that people are saying, hey, the guy who just fought Pessoa is a jiu-jitsu guy. This Gane guy is a 12-0 Muay Thai guy, and he just submitted a jiu-jitsu guy. Therefore, we have a great Muay Thai guy who also happens to have really good jiu-jitsu. Wow, he really is a great prospect after all. And the thing is that in MMA and grappling as well. I mean, all of MMA it applies, but it definitely applies in grappling. In a way, it's sort of like a dance where you have two people who are dancing together, and one guy is going for an attack, one guy is trying to defend and set up their own attacks. And one person can do a very good job of dancing on their own, but if their partner does a really bad job, it doesn't necessarily mean that the other guy did a bad job of dancing too, but it doesn't mean as much for them to be successful, I guess. It's sort of hard to explain, but I'll just go into the actual footage and explain it that way. So hopefully this actually pulls up. Okay, so what happened here is Gane actually kind of got thrown on the fence, but in the process of the throw trying to be completed, Pessoa didn't do a good job of keeping his balance about him and reinforcing his base. And so in that being an issue, Gane was able to roll through and end up on top here and in top of side control. So from here for Pessoa, if you're defending the proper way in jiu-jitsu, you're actually going to turn into him and try to shrimp in, get either a half guard or a full guard, go back to your guard, and then start attacking from there. In heavyweight MMA, that's probably not the best idea. So in this case, he decided he'd rather just try to turtle away and get up. But the turtle attempt really wasn't that good. He wasn't that explosive about it. He didn't really show a ton of effort to actually turtle up.
He got it down, but then just with the momentum.
So here he's starting to turn. But, I mean, it's not like he's really exploding into it. If you look at his legs, like they're both sort of parallel here. You're not seeing one leg swing over where he's actually like trying to get up to a base. He's just sort of slowly rolling over.
Rolled over and gone.
And in the process, Gane ends up grabbing this arm triangle. Now, typically if you're defending an arm triangle, there are a lot of different ways you can go about defending it or ways to relieve pressure. Just from a mechanical standpoint with an arm triangle or any other arm-in choke, the choke is being performed by having one arm that's directly on one side of the neck, so that's blocking one carotid artery. So in that case, that would be the right side of Pessoa's neck is being blocked. The other side here is the side with the arm in. And what Gane needs to do is press that arm into the neck to block the left artery. So if you're Pessoa, there's the answer the phone defense, which, 57 seconds left, that's probably not the best defense there. There are better options for you, but the answering the phone defense where he at least like tries to bring his arm in and like block his ear with it, that could potentially give him space and at least show that he's making an effort. Sometimes people will try to grab their own leg. So in this case, he'd be grabbing his left leg and trying to do that to create space. You could also just fully turtle up because, again, if you're turtled and he's able to shift his hips over and shift his shoulders over in the process, it's going to be tough for Gane to get pressure pushing that shoulder inward if he has to push from, say, rather than going straight down, but actually having like cut an angle on it because he's turned over. So a handful of different defenses that could be done here by Pessoa. Doesn't seem like he decides to do any of them, which is sort of bizarre.
Up on top, and look at this. Look for a head and arm choke on the jiu-jitsu guy. Wow.
And I mean, just at least here he's kind of connecting his hands. And from here, when you're connecting the hands, what you actually want to do is use in this case, it would be using his right arm to push the left arm over to create space. So you'd actually want to see like a push force in this direction. And it just seems more like he's holding it there than he's actually pushing.
Now the thing is, the problem for
Gane,
Gane
lets go and taps. So it's fair to say that Gane's submission wasn't against someone who was trying their hardest to defend it, or at least trying in a smart way to defend it. That being said, you take what you get. If you're in the cage and your opponent basically gives up on you, they just do a really poor job defending something, just keep attacking and finish. So that's not to take anything away from Gane. It's just, I think the point that needs to be made more so is that don't just read into it as Gane just submitted a really good jiu-jitsu guy, therefore Gane's really good at jiu-jitsu. I don't know that I would make that read on this. It was sort of a weird decision by him in most cases to take that submission attempt. So I'll go back to that. So typically in this case, I would look more for the back if I was on here than I would look for the arm triangle. And as I mentioned, there were a lot of ways that arm triangle could have been defended. So typically if you've done jiu-jitsu for a while, sometimes you actually assume that your opponent also knows what they're doing. So you try to go for what's high percentage rather than what sometimes might be there if they're just not doing a very good job. So it's hard to criticize them too much for taking the arm triangle because it ended up actually being there. But from a tactical standpoint, that's usually not what you want to go for in this position. But he does go for it.
Down, but then just with the momentum, rolled over and Gane ended up.
And then from here, one of the things I like that Gane actually did, though, is he stays on his toes, which is really important for this. But he's also actually going to be able to push off the fence and drive more pressure in. So as I mentioned, on this choke, it's really important in order to finish it to actually be able to drive the shoulder into the neck. And by pushing off the fence, it actually does help him.
On top, and look at this. Look for a head and arm choke on the jiu-jitsu guy. Wow.
So he's just kind of messing around with the grip there. And I'm sure he's got a strong grip. But here you can see the foot pushing off the fence. So at least that's a pretty good detail from him. But it's one of those things, like I said, it's hard to take too much away from Gane just because his opponent did a shitty job of defending. Like, Gane did what he had to do to get the finish. Could it have been a little bit nicer? Maybe. But I would just say slow down a little bit on Gane. He wasn't as impressive on the feet as I guess some people expected. He still did perfectly fine. On the ground, he did what he had to, but it's not as though he showed like some sort of high-level technique. He just beat a guy who apparently had already beaten himself. So I'd like to see more from him, but if I were you and I see high odds on him in the next fight, I wouldn't bet the house just to get a small return. So if he's like a minus 500 favorite, I wouldn't bet $2,000 just to make back like 400 or whatever that would be. So just keep that in mind. I'd like to see more from him. I'd like to see where he goes from here. It's interesting to see that a lot of people who follow the sport think that he's really a great prospect. Did what he had to do here, but maybe he's better than I realized. But I just think it's important that people slow their roll on him.